Good afternoon. Welcome to the Business Broadcast. Lovely to have you this afternoon. It's lovely blue sky outside. Just a couple things first. If you hear planes coming over, there's nothing we can do about that. It's just Lars happens to live just under a flight path, but it's we can just all be jealous listening to people going off to their holidays. Anyway, today I'm really lucky. I've got Lars Swann with us today because we are going to be talking about accounting apps, and Lars has a fantastic, inexhaustible knowledge about all the latest apps and what's going on and how to implement them properly. So, welcome to the broadcast.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Lars.
Cool.
And Lars, I know he's looking extremely fresh-faced, but he has been recording since very early this morning today, so he's already put in a good day's work already. But welcome to everybody. So as always, it is a live show, so please do post your questions as we go. Just pop into the comments, just say hi, even if it's just to say hi. It's always nice to see who's out there, but please do feel free to ask us any questions as we go, because I'm sure Lars will be able to answer just about anything. So right, so setting the scene. Why are we talking about apps today? There are literally hundreds of different apps now, aren't there, Lars, across everywhere. So we wanted to really focus today on how on earth do we wade our way through it all. So first of all, we thought it would be useful to start with when we're talking about apps, there's got to be a purpose for them. So we're looking at what functions. So our first port of call is how do we identify the function? So I shall talk a bit longer until that plane's gone. How do we identify the functions that we want to be looking at?
So generally, the way I would look at it is you look at your systems. So if you do a systems review of what your systems are, I would never start with an app and work my way to getting the app to work with my system. You always need to understand what the function is you want your app for. So I always reverse engineer it. I would say, look at your systems. Find out what the problem is or what the need is, and then try and find an app to solve that need. There are a lot of people that, like, I use the shiny toy syndrome, whereby they see this app, think it looks really nice and pretty, and how can I adopt that in my business? But the reality is you need to do it the other way around. You need to say, this is my systems, this is a problem I need to solve, or this is a problem I want to automate. How do I automate that problem? And are there any apps that will automate that for me? And how do I implement it to make sure it all works properly and comes all together? So do it the other way around. Don't buy your little Ferrari and all nice and happy. Find out what your problem is and then go and find an app that will solve it.
Absolutely, and it's a true testament to how much marketing some of the apps are doing. I'm sure you do as well, regularly getting people come in and say, oh, I want to use such and such. I want to use Xero, or want to use some other BrightPay or something else. And often I'll have the conversation and I'll say, great, why do you want to use it? And they say, oh, my friend said it's good, or they've seen some advert, or, absolutely, we need to go back to basics. Why do you want to have a blimmin' app in the first place? What do you need it for in your business, and looking at functions? So how do we, as we said, there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of apps out there. How do we sort out what apps are out there? How do we see the wood for the trees?
App provide.
Oh, sorry, Lars, I just lost your sound. No, I can't hear you. Oh, because you're not on mute. There we go. I can hear. Yeah, there you go. Go for it.
So most if you're looking at the two big accounting products have like QuickBooks and Xero are the big players in the app space with the add-ons. They will always have a app system by industry or by problem. So if you're looking for a app to automate credit control, they'll have an app that will do that for you. If you're looking for a app to put all your expenses in, there'll be I don't really want to say there's an app for that because that's kind of an old saying, isn't it? And well, there's an app for that. But there literally are thousands of apps. I know there's about 2,000-3,000 on the QuickBooks space. There's probably in excess of 1,000 on the Xero workspace. So they are split into different. So you'll have reporting apps, which makes reporting a lot nicer, a lot prettier. Something like Fathom, Spotlight Reporting, those types of apps. There'll be apps if you've got inventory. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you use Xero or QuickBooks for tracking your inventory, but there will be products for dealing with inventory. There will be products for dealing with if you're a trader, something like Simpro, which you send your plumbers out onto site and they'll be able to raise invoices there and then tick off the worksheets. It really does depend on what you want that app for. I mean, some of the bigger apps and then the most popular ones, things like Dext. Dext is one that will pull in information into your into your accounting system in terms of invoicing and also receipts. You have HubDoc as well. I mean, HubDoc is free with Xero, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than Dext at all. I would generally use something like Dext. The main apps are going to be things like Dex, Approval Max, Expensify. So if you've got a lot of expenses that you need to process, you give your staff a debit card and it all pulls into Expensify for you for all those process. I would almost like to say there's probably an app for any type of function, and where there isn't an app for every type of function, if you've got an open API with your two app providers, you can use a product called Zapier that will connect the two systems together and do a lot of the functionality that is more bespoke for you.
Excellent. I'm just writing down about Zapier just to.
I call it Zapier. Some people call it Zapier.
Yeah.
It connects two systems together, and then you can create triggers that push stuff and pull stuff from different databases.
Brilliant. So when we were chatting earlier, it was interesting approach that you wanted me to go for me to ask was saying how shouldn't you select an app? So tell me, how shouldn't we do it?
Well, the how shouldn't you is really find an app and make the app work for your system. You do it the other way around. You basically find the problem and then find the app that will solve your problem. There's always a degree of compromise because ultimately these are off-the-shelf apps, so the app manufacturer or the software engineers are going to think, well, actually this is a problem we've got that everyone needs to solve, so we will produce a application to be able to solve that problem, but you wouldn't necessarily use all of the functionality of that problem. Biggest example of that is in the accountancy profession is practice management software. There are probably 10 different online pieces of practice management software, and I've tried every one of them, and I will guarantee you there is no such thing as a perfect piece of practice management software for an accounting firm or for a business, because they will think, oh, we have to do it this way, whereas you want to do it a different way. You have your own little quirks in your business as to how you do things, and you don't always want it to fit around the applications that you're using.
Okay, so we've established obviously there are literally thousands of apps out there. How do we actually know and establish if any of them are actually any good?
So I've always With Xero, it's easier because what you can do is you can actually create a company and use the demo company and test an app. The other idea is to make sure you have a thorough demo of the app and ask as many questions as you can think of to ensure that that app is going to do something for you. Because the worst case scenario is you implement an app, and if there's clients involved in that process, you implement an app, find out there's something you can't do, and all of a sudden you've either got to go with that app forever because you've rolled it out to clients, or you end up with a bit of an egg on your face because you're going to have to take that app away from the clients and give them something else. So it's worth investing time and money in making sure the app's going to actually work for you, even if that's a question of setting up another instant of your accounting just to test all the workflows. But most app providers will help you through that. I've not known many companies that won't give you support with their onboarding and making sure that everything's working properly, because of course it's in their interest to do so, because they want to keep billing you every month for the use of that app.
Yeah, indeed. So, but its key message there is don't just dive straight into the app, test it first.
Yeah.
And because there are multiple ones for lots of different functions, so select a few to test if you have time.
Yes,
certainly. And I was always I'd always say ask for recommendations from similar businesses as well. No good, getting a recommendation from a construction company to a pub, for example. But if there's people in the similar space, it's good to hear what works for them.
But most of Xero particularly does it by industry, so you can actually look at your industry for the apps. But also they have reviews on the app, so there will be a 5-star, 4-star review on what other people thought of that application. So and usually with the way the Xero Marketplace works, the bigger the review, the higher up the list they become. So for instance, Approval Max, for instance, is on the top 4 apps for Xero, and it has 255 5-star reviews.
Wow. And hopefully they're not all employees of that company.
Well, hopefully not, no.
So just a reminder that please do take this time to ask Lars about any questions live. Pete has just pointed out that we all know Pete does like his shiny toys, so he does. So try and not do a Pete, and not go and fall for that shiny toys, and take your time and test and review. So how do we, once we've selected those apps, how do we ensure that they're going to be efficiently joined up and they're all going to work together?
Well, that most of that's down to the testing and also on the onboarding process by the app provider. They will help you onboard it. They will help you iron out any problems you've got. In some instances, they will actually onboard. They will onboard the application for you. I mean, the one springs to mind that's quite complicated to put together, but actually is a really good application, is a product called Vend. Which is an Australian point of sale system which uses in the retail sector. And essentially what that does is if you've got 3 or 4 shops or even a single shop, people will take payments, and it's got a product scanner, and at the end of the day it pulls all those sales into your Xero and deals with all the VAT issues and all the stuff around that. You can do discounts, you can do loyalties, so that is quite a complex app to implement. So what Vend do is they help you with the implementation process and walk customers through it to ensure it's all. But there are of course simple apps, which credit control apps link to your aged receivables. So if customers owe you money, it will automatically automate your credit control. But of course, some of these apps, there's also a bit of you also have to. There's a trade-off, because you need to make sure that some of your data is always up to date. So if you're going to use an app, you need to make sure your bookkeeping is regularly up to date.
Absolutely. Systems are always only as good as the
Yeah.
data that's put in.
It's like the
Absolutely.
old analogy, garbage in, garbage out. So, you've got to make sure you put it in and it's all up to date, particularly with credit control, because if you don't post all your payments, you could inadvertently be sending out quite quite assertive chasers to your clients when they've actually paid the invoice.
Which makes them very, very upset.
Yes.
You can potentially then lose your client, which is not great.
No.
As I said, there's so many going out there. What have been your particular favourites that you've come across this year that you were like really impressed with?
So I use Vend. I love Vend. Vend works really well as an application, and integrates with Xero quite well. Satago is a credit control application, and Satago Works is also a funding tool, so you can do credit checks on clients through it. You can do credit control through it, but you can also raise finance if you need finance. Fluidly is a really good app that's purely around cash flow forecasting. So if you're looking, particularly coming out of lockdown, if you're looking at where your cash flow requirements are, that will work. It's quite intelligent. It works off the data in Xero to predict where your cash flow is going to be at any more time. You've got Fathom, which is a reporting tool, which is quite good. Interesting about Fathom, it does consolidated reporting if you're a group structure. Spotlight reporting is fairly similar. Spotlight they tend to sell it more through accountants than they do individual companies. But Spotlight's been going around for quite some years. There used to be a product called, I think it's called now Futurely. So that's based around dashboards. So if you want to understand where your sales are on a day-by-day basis, it pulls up a dashboard and you can work out different KPIs. And
Yeah, we've used Futurely for a few clients, and it's they've got quite nice pictorials on it and things, so
yeah,
it's quite nice.
it can take a bit of time to set that up properly.
Yeah.
Um,
You only really want to do it on sort of the bigger clients, probably
yeah,
the ones that you've got time for. Yeah.
but of course you can integrate things like HubSpot into it, Mailchimp into Xero. So all your customer data is being shared between your CRM system and your accounting system. So your sales system integrates with Xero, and their products like Quotient. So if you're doing quotes for a customer, you can use a product called Quotient. I mean, for accountants, generally you probably look at a product called Practice Ignition, or although they've changed that name, these apps keep changing their
Ignition,
names. Yeah, it's called Ignition app,
just Ignition. We use that.
and
Yeah.
the other one is Go Proposal, which is another proposal app for accountants. Although you can tweak Ignition so it doesn't work for an accountant. There are companies that use Ignition even though they're not in the accounting sector.
Yeah, it's the way it is with how it's set up with Ignition. It's pretty good for any sort of consultancy type practice, really. Um, you know, you could easily adapt it. Absolutely. So, coming up into our summary now, really, you've got your 3-step plan. Do you want to just share with the viewers the 3 key things to follow to make sure that when they're choosing the right app, they get the right one?
Well, the first part of that is understand your systems and identify where you've got problems or what you want to automate. That's the first important thing. Once you've identified your problem, then you need to go and find an app that will help you to solve your problem. And once you've found the app that's going to solve your problem, you of course then need to test it and make sure you can implement it correctly and there's no issues. There are always going to be teething problems in new IT systems. It doesn't matter what IT system you put in place. There will always be some teething problems somewhere. But if you test it properly, then there will be less of them than if you didn't test it properly.
And would you recommend a particular time during the cycle for a business of when to implement an app?
I would probably recommend if at the end of a VAT quarter, because obviously it affects your VAT position. For accountants, I would never recommend doing it in January.
Indeed. Yeah, so it's a bit tricky if you're trying to do it for a December year-end client.
Yeah. So, but certainly do it once the end of your VAT quarter.
Indeed.
And it's the advice we usually give to clients if they're going to change accounting software. Do it at the end of a VAT quarter.
Yeah. Okay, so just summary up from that. So when you're trying to choose the app, always review your system first. Make sure what you understand what you're actually wanting to do. Then identify what the actual problem is. So understand what is actually missing within what you've got at the moment and what that problem is that you're trying to fix. And then finally is when you actually go and find the right app to solve the problem. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Lars.
No problem.
I hope you're having hope you get to have a lovely weekend. And next week, we are going to be talking about, so just a reminder, if you haven't paid your second payment on account for your tax return, do you pay it today? Because we're going to be talking about some tips on personal tax returns next week. So do join me for that. Oh, just 1 second. We have last minute questions come in, Lars. Let's just check that. Is there a which guide to apps showing amount of users and ease of use, etc., or is that you, Lars? So you did mention about Xero Space has got some.
So
where do you go?
So the Xero, if you do a search on Google for Xero apps, it will take you to the Xero Marketplace, and that's set by industry. In QuickBooks, I believe it's within your QuickBooks login. So once you've logged in, there is a marketplace within QuickBooks that you can go and search ads. I don't know about Sage or any of the other bigger all the other software that do accounting software. I'm more of a Xero QuickBooks.
But to be fair, most of the apps are utilised by Xero.
Yeah.
QuickBooks and Sage, so most of them will go. I mean, there's one or two that I've come across that are only Sage, but
of course, don't forget if you can't find an app that you need something to do, you can always look at Zapier, because that may be able to help you connect two different bits of software together.
Absolutely, and then do something a bit more bespoke. And then ultimately, when you get to a decent size, you forget about all the different apps and you start looking at proper ERP systems anyway.
Yes, and another important, very, very quickly, another important thing is always review your apps once a year, because you end up paying for apps you don't use anymore.
Indeed. And then it might seem not very much money, but then it all soon adds up if you end up subscribing to half a dozen. Indeed. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lars. Have a lovely weekend. And we'll see you all next week.
Brilliant.
Cheerio.
Thank you. Cheers.